What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Lions video. Now, yesterday we talked extensively about the Detroit Lions' new front seven, what formation they'd be running, who the projected starters are, and really everything you need to know and everything you need to expect from this Detroit Lions front seven come the 2021 regular season. But what we did not talk about yesterday was the improvement in the secondary. Now, if you've been following the Detroit Lions this offseason, you will likely know that the biggest highlights of this offseason have been the improvements of the trenches, the offensive line and the defensive line. The quarterback trade was a big one. The wide receiver room change has been a big talking point. But one of the things that I think has been swept under the rug and has been a very underrated and unnoticed feature of this Lions offseason has been the upgrades they have made in the secondary. Now, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions secondary, what they accomplished last year, how they have improved both from the coaching standpoint, from the talent standpoint, from the depth standpoint, and from many other viewpoints, how they've improved, why they are going to be better next season, and what to expect from the secondary come week one. But with all that being said, and without any further ado, let's get right into talking about this new look Detroit Lions secondary, some of the starters, some of the projected schemes, and what we might see come 2021. Now, it's no secret to anybody that the Detroit Lions secondary a season ago was not a very good one. In 2020, in fact, the Detroit Lions secondary as a whole only had 5 interceptions in 16 games and only managed 34 passes defended. That is almost less than 2 passes defended per football game. Now, one of the biggest upgrades the Lions made this season was actually not one on the field. It was one within the coaching staff, as the Detroit Lions brought in both Aubrey Pleasant to be the new secondaries coach for the Detroit Lions, as well as Aaron Glenn, the former secondary coordinator from the New Orleans Saints. Now, the Los Angeles Rams a season ago, under the guidance of Aubrey Pleasant as their secondaries coach, came up with 14 interceptions in the 2020 season. Now, that of course is while the defense was actively avoiding Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey being one of the greatest shutdown cornerbacks in the NFL right now, and if he keeps playing at this level, could have a case for one of the better shutdown cornerbacks in NFL history. Of course, teams were looking to avoid him, and Jalen Ramsey does not come up with the biggest stat line, does not come up with the biggest plays necessarily or the biggest highlights, but he is one of the biggest lockdown corners in the NFL and allows the rest of his teammates to feast and eat and have a great time on the football field. The Rams secondary last year, while being the number one defense in football, came up with 14 interceptions, and the New Orleans Saints, under the guidance of new defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, actually came up with 16 interceptions a season ago. Now, if you know me, if you've talked to me, if you know anything about my view on football, I believe that coaching has a ton to do with player success. I think scheme, I think putting your players in the right position, and I think having your players just be comfortable in your system and in your scheme and be comfortable in the things that they are doing makes your players play far better than they otherwise would. Matt Patricia's system left Jeff Okudah and Amani and Desmond Trufant and Justin Coleman very uncomfortable, very unsure, and gave them very little room for error, so that when they did make those errors, it looked way worse and looked far worse than it actually was. So with that being the case, I believe the better coaching in general, with the Detroit Lions bringing in one of the best pairs of secondary coaches the NFL had to offer this offseason, of course being Aubrey Pleasant and Aaron Glenn, that alone is going to make the Detroit Lions a far better roster, make them a far better secondary, and make them that much better as a football team and of course as a defense. Now, they are coming into a little bit of talent. These two coaches are coming into a little bit of secondary talent, being the 3rd overall pick from a season ago, Mr. Jeff Okudah. Now, Jeff Okudah admittedly did underperform a season ago. He did come up with an interception, did have a couple nice tackles for loss, did have a couple nice hits, but overall was very underwhelming for the 3rd overall pick. However, he does of course have a ton of talent, does of course have a ton of upside still, and has actually said multiple times that even in the short time that he's been working with Aubrey Pleasant and with Aaron Glenn, he has learned a lot and has become a far better player and a far better cornerback in this offseason, just because he knows these two coaches and has been able to kind of pick their brain and talk to them over and over and over again this offseason. Now, Amani Oruwariye has also shown a ton of flashes over his first 2 seasons as a Detroit Lion, having 3 interceptions in his first 2 seasons seasons, not always being a starter, not always being outside, not always being on the field for the Lions because Matt Patricia, of course, made some poor decisions with his play time and with his play style, but a player that nonetheless over and over and over again has made a ton of big plays for the Lions secondary over the past couple of years, regardless of how bad the secondary may be. Another player in a very similar situation to that would be Tracy Walker, who actually graded over the past 3 seasons over his time in the NFL, is graded, I believe, as a top 5 free safety in the NFL by Pro Football Focus when he's actually playing the deep free safety position. The only problem is that Tracy Walker has not been able to play that free safety position very often because Matt Patricia did not allow him to do so. Tracy Walker, I think, is one of the most underrated safeties in the NFL. He has all the talent in the world to be successful. He's just not been put in a situation or a scheme yet in the NFL that has really played to his talents and played to his skills enough for him to have a truly dominant season. And then, of course, Mike Ford, being kind of a depth cornerback, is also a guy that is returning, a guy that has not really been a full-time starter, a guy that is not really necessarily even a fan favorite or a guy that everybody knows and talks about, but is a guy that just every single day plays good football. I don't think I've ever seen a game where Mike Ford consistently gets beat, or I don't think I've ever seen a lot of experience. I don't think that there are very many instances where you can find Mike Ford playing truly bad football. All around, he's just a very good cornerback who works hard. He's got good length, good speed. He's a really, really solid cornerback and a great depth piece who may actually see a little bit more time this offseason. Now, of course, the new additions in free agency this season from a talent perspective include Corn Elder, who had extensive playing time with the Carolina Panthers a season ago and looked pretty solid doing so. Quinton Dunbar, who has been a really, really solid cornerback over the past several years for both the Washington football team and the Seattle Seahawks. And then, of course, at the safety position, Dean Marlowe has come in to be a depth and a rotational safety for the Detroit Lions, I believe coming up with 2 interceptions for the Buffalo Bills a season ago. Now, of course, with that being said, the Lions also drafted a couple secondary players and, of course, signed a couple out of UDFA. Yeah, guys like, of course, Afedi Melifonwu, who was drafted in the 3rd round. You have D'Angelo Amos, who was a UDFA safety. You have Jerry Jacobs. You have AJ Parker. You have, of course, some of those guys that were UDFA free agents and guys that could be competing for secondary spots. And then you have guys that are just coming back that are going to be backups or role players, right? You have Will Harris, who was a 3rd round pick a few seasons ago. You have Jalen Elliott, who I thought would look pretty solid in training camp a season ago, was on the practice squad, was a protected player on the practice squad for pretty much every single week. It was a guy that just over and over again was talked about as being pretty impressive in training camp, a guy that was pretty impressive throughout, practices and training. It was a guy that actually was talked about making the starting roster at the end of the preseason or at the end and the beginning of the season a year ago. Now, Bobby Price is also a returning member of the secondary. He is a player that I believe is like 6'4", has incredible athletic ability, and could see some playing time this season. A guy that I'm very excited to see in the preseason. Again, I mentioned D'Angelo Amos, the UDFA out of Virginia. You have Jerry Jacobs, the UDFA out of Arkansas. You have AJ Parker, the UDFA out of, I believe, Kansas State. And then you have a guy like CJ Moore, who is a returning member, more of a special teams guy, but over the Quinn Trisha regime did see some playing time at safety as well. So with that being said, the Lions do have a decent secondary as far as talent-wise. Of course, I think it's far better at the cornerback position than at the safety position, but I think they also have a lot of versatile players. Jeff Okudah can play both the cornerback and the safety position at a high level next season. Same thing applies to Afedi Melifonwu. I think Bobby Price and Jalen Elliott could be big surprises this year going into their sophomore campaigns, not really getting an opportunity a season ago, but of course this year getting a true preseason, getting a true offseason, and maybe having a chance in the preseason to make a couple of plays. You have guys like Quinton Dunbar, who's coming off of injury, but has played very, very well over his career. Mike Ford is going to have a chance to make some plays in the preseason. Will Harris, under new guidance and under new secondary coaches, may have a chance to really boost his stock and maybe play at a far higher level than what we saw under the Quinn Trisha regime. There is a lot of optimism. There is a lot of optimism surrounding this team. And although the Detroit Lions secondary is probably not the best secondary in the NFL, of course, I'm not going to go out here and I'm not going to tell you that this secondary is a top 1 in the NFL talent-wise. I'm not going to tell you that they're even a top 10 secondary talent-wise in the NFL. But what I will say is I don't think you're going to find a better secondary coaching duo than Aubrey Pleasant and Aaron Glenn. And what I will tell you is that the Lions do have some talent in the secondary. Jeff Okudah is talented. Amani Oruwariye is talented. Tracy Walker is talented. Mike Ford is talented. Will Harris was a former third-round pick, definitely has some skills to work with. Corn Elder and Quentin Dunbar and Dean Marlowe and Jalen Elliott and Bobby Price, D'Angelo Amos and CJ Moore all have talent that can be molded. They all have potential for Aubrey Pleasant and Aaron Glenn to work with. And although this might not be the flashiest secondary, although this might not have the biggest name players in the NFL, I do think the secondary will be significantly improved a season from now. I do think by the end of 2021, we're talking about this secondary, maybe not as a top 10 unit, but definitely as a top 15 unit with better coaching, with better help, with better schemes, with more improved players, and players that have already come out and said that they are learning much more about their positions. They are learning tips and tricks and techniques and ways to play that Matt Patricia just simply never taught them that will be so beneficial next season. With everything coming together, everything kind of snowballing into the perfect situation, I do think the Detroit Lions secondary will be vastly improved a season from now. Now, with all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think about this Lions secondary? How good do you think they can be? What do you think their ceiling is for the 2020 season? What do you think is their biggest addition for this team? Do you think talent-wise they can keep up with these NFL receiving corps? And how do you think these two new positional coaches and defensive coordinator are going to be for Detroit? Well, with all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching the video. And until next time, and as always, go Lions!